All right, so welcome to the September 2023 Hawk, and we got the lights kind of moving around. That's all right. Are we good? Can you see me now? All right, getting my good side. So Habitat and Wildlife Keepers, we're the North Carolina Wildlife Federation Matthews chapter, started at Squirrel Lake Park quite a number of years ago. We're at 17 or 18 years at this point. 2006, so depending on when in 2006 you think, we're 17, 18 years at this point. So the big part of it is we're part of the National Wildlife Federation, and certifying your yard has been something that they've promoted for many, many years. Real simple. Just a couple of things. You know, you've got, it's right here, food, water, cover, and places to raise young. But there's a fifth piece, actually, to that, and that is being gentle with anything that ends with "side," right? The fungicides, the herbicides, all of that stuff. So what we're really after is trying to coincide and build a habitat and an ecosystem. If you start killing everything off in that ecosystem, well, it gets everything all out of kilter, as you can see with all the mosquitoes and everything else. So certifying your yard is actually a fairly easy thing to do. You go to the National Wildlife Federation website, and they'll go through a checklist with you, and lo and behold, you can find how to get yourself certified. And you get this nifty little sign if you want to get one. Teach all your neighbors. All right, so Hawk is all volunteer, and so we're always looking for folks to help out as much or as little as you guys can offer. We have Kids in Nature Day. I'll talk about that in a minute. But we have a Kids in Nature Day and an Earth Day event in October and in April. Fabulous event over at Squirrel Lake Park. A lot of fun. A lot of people get to teach them all sorts of stuff about environmental, from water conservation to native plants to Sierra clubs and all that kind of stuff. We are looking for folks for our leadership team, the folks that go and find speakers, like our speaker tonight, to come and do presentations for us and teach us about snakes and possums and bats and fungus and elderberry. Whatever sort of commitment you can help. This is actually our first season that we're going to start doing all in-person meetings. We're not doing Zoom anymore. So we are recording it for folks to be able to, have and learn from in the future, but we're not doing Zoom anymore. So if you want to see it, come on down. Unfortunately, the people in Arizona and all over the country that had been coming to our Zoom presentations, they're going to have to spend a lot on airfare. So we're looking for a variety of different kind of positions. Again, as little or as much as you guys want to be able to help us out with volunteers and doing any sort of social media and that type of stuff, please. So Kids in Nature Day, I mentioned that to you guys a moment ago. Kids in Nature Day is coming up in a few weeks, October 7th at Squirrel Lake Park. If you are available that day to come, great. If you're available to come and volunteer, even better. So we're looking for folks to help kids fish, and we're looking for folks with STEM activities and nature crafts and hikes and all sorts of fun things that we're going to have as far as environmental exhibitors over there. So put it on your calendars for October the 7th coming up. Another thing, the following week, the town of Matthews is giving away free native trees to Matthews residents. For the longest time, there was Trees Charlotte that was giving away in Mecklenburg County, but not to Matthews residents, only to City of Charlotte residents. So Pineville, Harrisburg, all the other towns that are in Mecklenburg, sorry, no. And Matthews was one of those sorry no's. Well, now we have our own couple of hundred trees to give away. So put it on your calendars. You can sign up if you have a Matthews address for October the 14th. You should ought to see stuff on the Town of Matthews website that'll give you more info on that. But that's coming up October 14th. And this is kind of why we do it, right? For the butterflies on what looks like liatris. But there's a really interesting story that just came out from the South Carolina Wildlife Commission, and they had there was a study, a 5-year study, and it turns out there's a group of monarch butterflies that don't go all the way back to Mexico. They hang out in South Carolina along the coast, and they're living on a variety of different kind of not only milkweed, but another plant that they're surviving and reproducing with. So very interesting. We're going to go ahead and post it on the Hawk website when we get around to it. But that's another social media volunteer that we need. So if you want it quicker, we'll get it to you. You just have to volunteer with us. But really interesting stuff that's going on in nature. So talking about all the fun ones, right? So this time of year, everybody starts bagging their leaves. The notion of leaving your leaves, there are a lot of caterpillars, a lot of insects that overwinter in that leaf layer. So leave your leaves. If you gotta rake them, do it gently, put it in the back corner of your yard. There's a lot of cocoons and a lot of overwintering insects that are in that leaf layer. So you're thrown away like this beautiful guy. This is a red-banded hair streak, impressive. So instead of having this, your neighbors are putting them in paper bags and they're going to be turned into compost. So instead, go and rescue all those bags, put them in your yard, and you'll have a whole bunch of other stuff. Luna moths and all sorts of other things. So our sponsors, Birdhouse on the Greenway, for many years has helped us out. Williams Subaru has been a sponsor of ours on our Earth Day celebration for many years now as well. We thank them very much and are delighted to have them still in the community. Tonight we're up for a special guest with Kate Seidel from Double Up Farm. She is right in Mint Hill, I believe? Stanfield, sorry. But she comes to the Matthews Farmers Market, so you might recognize her from the Matthews Farmers Market on Saturday mornings. Elderberry products and sheep wool products. So really interesting. Tonight she's going to teach us all about growing and harvesting elderberry and then making syrup and gummies and all sorts of other fun stuff, jams that you can make. But tonight we're going to do elderberry syrup. So we're in for a real treat with that. Kate, come on up and I will get your presentation loaded up here. If I can find where my mouse is.
I kind of wish I'd put makeup on now that I realize we're going to be filming.
It's far away.
So you can turn those lights back on.
You know, that's my belief at home. If I keep the lights low, nobody can see how dirty the house is, so I don't worry about it.
Just hit the space bar and it'll advance.
Okay.
Awesome.
I'm Kate Seidel. I live in Stanfield. For those of you that don't know where Stanfield is, go halfway to Albemarle. You're going to run across a little town called Locust. We're actually smaller than Locust, so we're on the outskirts of Locust. The logo for our farm explains how I ended up doing something like this. I was looking for a farm property for my horses. We keep Norwegian fjord horses, and so we were looking for a farm property, and this is actually taken from two of my horses, and that became our logo. I tend to do things in twos. So I've had two husbands, we had two houses, two kids, two dogs, so we were the double up. Is the volume off on this?
Actually, the volume will kick on this thing. Not applicable.
All right, you'll just have to imagine it. You guys are getting the vision of my dog Zoe. We did animal rescue, dog rescue for a long time, and so Zoe passed away 3 weeks ago. And so this presentation is dedicated to Zoe. If you hang out on Instagram, I do a lot of reels. I'm not going to lie, most of them are my dogs. And the ones that aren't my dogs are of me kayaking. So it may not be super exciting. This particular soundtrack was She's Got It. Because she was definitely the heart of our farm. Before we dive into everything you ever wanted to know about elderberries, one of the things I'm passionate about, and if you come to the market and I happen to be working the booth, you'll find out, is making sure everybody does this. There's no secret to it. There's no reason everybody shouldn't be making their own elderberry syrup. So what I'm going to be doing during the presentation is brewing up a pot of elderberry syrup. I did bring my crock pot because it's too hard to fire up a burner. And this is just hot water. These are dried elderberries from my orchard. Most people have seen them. They look like little hard pieces of dirt. Not gonna lie, that's kind of what they taste like too. This is my high-tech lingerie bag that I use. At home I have a commercial pot and I do it a little differently, but for traveling we use this. Okay, that's it. That's how hard it is to make elderberry syrup. There's no reason. It's hot water, it's elderberries, and in the course of my presentation, these will rehydrate, soak out, and then we will sample our elderberry syrup by the time we're done. I did also want to show you that this is what we're gunning for. So I brought a jar of finished product. One of the things that I like people to do is taste what it tastes like right out of the pot. I'm not gonna lie, it's bad. It's like drinking dirt. But once you sweeten it, it's delicious. This year I'm tackling elderberry wine, so we'll see how that works out. So, I am not an expert. What I am is, I think they call me a homesteader. 15 years ago, they called me a hobby farmer, but now I'm a homesteader, and I like that better. I'm also a certified herbalist because I wanted to learn how to do things myself, and that included treating any medical issues. So I went out and became a certified herbalist. I'm not sure why I became a yoga instructor, except that it seemed like a really good idea, and I was spending all this time at the yoga studio learning to do yoga, and then COVID hit, so why not do it myself? I consider myself an elderberry crafter. So when I say what I'm not an expert. I'm just a regular person that started growing elderberries, and I've gotten a little carried away with it. I keep a lot of gardeners, and I had to laugh when I was looking at your earlier presentation because I say that I'm the laziest gardener in the world, but apparently I'm one of you. I just do things naturally, and I don't introduce anything artificial to the environment, and I encourage things to live on the farm. I didn't bring any photos, but we've had a flock of wild turkeys move onto the farm. And that's been really interesting. So I think I need to be certified as a wildlife habitat as well. I have a flock of sheep, and that's only because I learned one year at horse camp how to spin yarn out of wool. And I was buying a lot of fleeces and thought, well, why the heck not just raise sheep too? So I do that. We keep a lot of poultry. It means that I've stopped eating chicken and turkey because friends don't eat friends. I eat a lot of eggs, and yeah, this is really what it looks like on the farm. And now with the turkeys, I just don't even know how to explain how that happened or why I have so many, and they're not exactly wild anymore because they eat the chicken feed, but they're legit wild turkeys. And there was a reason Benjamin Franklin suggested that turkeys be our national bird instead of eagles. They're phenomenal birds. If you ever have a chance, get to know some wild turkeys. I am a fiber artist because that sounds a lot nicer than saying, oh, I do a lot of stuff with wool. So I do spin wool into yarn. I do 2D art. I needle felt. I dye wool. If you come to my booth at the farmer's market, that's really the only place I sell it. And in fact, that's what drove me to the farmer's market in the first place. I had an attic full of yarn that I had spun. I don't knit. So I started selling it. I do keep a booth at the farmer's market. It's rare to see me there anymore. I stopped working at my paying job 4 years ago and decided I would do the business full time. And it turns out that it's not enough to actually make a living. So I've gone back to my paying job doing technology for Bank of America. And I have a good friend that mans my booth at the farmer's market. And so sometimes I'm there, sometimes I'm not. Typically, they refer to me either as the wool lady or now I'm the elderberry lady. The elderberry has turned out to be much more profitable in terms of something that we can produce and sell. It's extremely expensive to buy my yarn, and not everybody cares about it. When I say I'm not an expert, I have no degree in whatever this stuff is. I planted elderberries because I wanted to make elderberry syrup for me and my family. And it turns out that elderberries are basically a weed in North Carolina. The state of North Carolina will tell you it's impossible to get rid of them. Once they've taken hold, you can't kill them. They've tried. So every year you will see them come through and mow down the elderberries, and then they douse them with chemicals to try and kill them. And every spring they are back like clockwork. And so along the way, I have figured out what works for me. I started off with 3 elderberry bushes, and because the birds help themselves, and on our farm, I don't stop them, they started spreading them. And then when friends started asking, where are you getting your elderberry syrup? I did start planting them myself. What I'm growing at my farm are European elderberries, or that's what I started with. Specifically, the species? Right. That's the word I want. I use one called a Bob Gordon, and I use York. I don't know what that is. I know what it's not. It's not Bob Gordon and it's not York. But yeah, I'm not good enough to know what that is. And yeah. One of the reasons I was interested in starting to grow them in bulk was that I discovered most elderberries in this country are coming from Croatia and Bulgaria. I don't know what the climate is there, but apparently it's really good for elderberries. So I assume it's something like North Carolina, not quite as damp. There has been a growing interest in American elderberries, and I'm not sure that the average person could tell the difference. And what we see growing here and what I've seen in my own orchard is my European elderberries aren't exactly European elderberries anymore. I don't know that they would pass a genetic test identifying the species because I've cross-pollinated with the native elderberries. And some of those are American and some of them are rogue European. I don't think there's a huge difference. I'm sure people that are deadly serious about elderberries would disagree. For those of us that are just interested in growing them, yeah. What we have going is great. I personally started out with Norm's elderberries because when I started farming, I didn't realize they were basically a weed. So I ran out and bought them. I could have just gone to any ditch or drainage area and dug them up and planted them myself. But no, I had to go out and buy mine. And so I planted 3 plants in 2012. I now have more than 100, thanks to the birds spreading them. And then every year I will dig up the canes, like blackberry canes, and just transplant them. Like I say, it's almost impossible to kill them. And I like to, I'm very tidy, maybe pathologically tidy. So every year is dedicated to a new row in the orchard so that I can see 2015, 2016, 2017. I know by where they're located what year I planted them. I do encourage people that want to grow elderberries to just go to a location and dig up those starts in about April. a lot of people will propagate with cuttings from the elderberries. The challenge for that is cuttings need to happen when the plants go dormant. And there are years here in North Carolina where they never go dormant. And so you're really taking a chance trying to do your own cuttings. I wholly support Norms. My entire orchard came from them. But I also just tell people, go out in April, find where those canes are coming up and dig them up, stick them in the ground. I water them for about the first week, and then they are good to go. I don't believe in coddling anything at the farm. You're going to have to skip the video of me weed eating the elderberries since I don't have sound, and you kind of miss it without the sound. I have a very, we'll call it an organic approach. Again, I think it's because I just don't want to fuss with things. If it doesn't want to grow here, I'm not going to force it to grow. It's hard to keep the elderberries under control because they are spreading and spreading and spreading. At our orchard, my rows are just wide enough for me to get through with the mower. And every now and again, my tidiness overtakes me and I'll go out and weed eat. But beyond that, I don't do anything with them. I don't compost them. I don't fertilize them. I don't spray them with anything. Most commercial elderberry growers do. I don't irrigate mine. Maybe why my productivity isn't quite what it could be if I was serious about the business. They get by on the rain that they get. If you are interested in growing them, they will do better where the ground is damp. So that's why you see them in drainage ditches. They really like that. My orchard happens to be on the spot of the farm, which is very, very low and floods whenever it rains. And they're very, very happy there. If you've driven along the freeway, you've seen elderberries. At the farmer's market, send people over to the ditch. I don't know if you know where the farmer's market is here, but in between the farmer's market and the post office, there's a big gully filled with elderberries. Along the train tracks, hundreds of elderberries. So long about May, when you go to those areas, when you're driving on the freeway, you'll see these beautiful white flowers. And those are elderberry bushes. By the time you see the flowers, it's really too late to dig them up. They're going to die. If you try and dig up a cane, once they're flowering, they're going to die. But mark where they're at. I encourage people to not go and pick the elderberries because they've probably been sprayed with poisons. The gully, that's probably pretty safe. Along the freeway, never pick an elderberry. It's tempting because they grow so thick, but they are literally covered with car exhaust. They've been sprayed every year to try and kill them. Go and dig up a start and plant it. That's going to be safe, but don't pick the elderberries, no matter how tempting it is. The flowers I use to make elderberry or elderflower cordial and elderflower tea. Elderflower used to be very popular. It's still quite popular in Sweden. And I make an elderflower syrup because I have one customer from Sweden who asked for it. It became most popular during one of the royal weddings because they made an elderflower cordial wedding cake. So there was a big resurgence in popularity. It's herbal. People taste it thinking it's going to be flowery. It's not. It's an herbal flavor. Like everything else, it's delicious with a little bit of sugar in it. But it's not for everybody's taste. When I dry them, depending on how many I want to sacrifice for elderflower, I will either dry them on big racks or I do use my electric dehydrator if I'm not doing huge quantities. This is what the hype is about, the elderberries themselves. People will ask me how they know it's time to pick the elderberries For me, the best way to know is when they snap off easily in your hand. Of course, by that time, if they're not ready, it's too late. You've already picked them and you're stuck with them. They are very, very dark purple. And you can heft them and feel how heavy they are with the juice. Typically, you'll see the branches hanging down because the fruit is so heavy. Because I don't use any kind of pesticide, my elderberries are an adventure in being attacked when you go out there because there are tons of bugs on them. So I will be out in the third week of July in long sleeves and a big hat trying to protect myself from the bugs. Oddly enough, I think when I have done more wildcrafting, because I pick from my own orchard, I also have, all elderberry makers have these secret stashes of wild berries that we don't tell anybody about because we don't want other people to pick them. But I found that the wild ones actually have fewer bugs, and that may just be that they're a hardier plant that's developed that way. And most of my orchard is coming from stock that is European elderberries. So everybody's berries ripen at a different time. Mine tend to ripen from about the second week of July through the middle of August. And they have an extremely short shelf life. So you will almost never see fresh elderberries for sale. Because if you pick them, usually within 2 to 3 days, they've rotted on the vine. So when we're harvesting, we're out, we're picking, and they go directly into the freezer until I have time to then start processing them again. Did I mention they don't taste good? They look like they should taste good. They are delightful looking. They kind of look like currants, and you think they're going to be delicious. They're not. This is actually a picture of every single place in North and South Carolina. When you drive by and see a power pole, in May, it's going to look like this. And if this happens to be an area where I will go and pick because it's not a big road and it's too far out for anybody to go and spray them. They don't care. If you came back to this bush in 4 weeks, it would be covered with berries and would be a safe place to pick and use them. But again, for the most part, don't stop. Don't pick the ones along the railroad track. Really, really nasty, full of creosote. It's not going to do you any good. This is my high-tech operation at home. So for me, because my berries are almost always frozen, I will sit and pull all of the berries off of the stems, and then they go into my steam extractor. Most elderberry makers who are working with fresh berries are doing a crush and strain. I prefer not to do that because you end up with a higher percentage of the seeds in your elderberry juice. Almost all elderberries have bugs in them, and I just prefer to filter all of that out. So my steam extractor basically explodes the berries, and then I pour the juice off. For me, most of my juice is used in the jams that I make. The berries that I will then turn into syrup or sell, I dehydrate because they keep better. Why do people care about it? So elderberry's been used for probably 5,000, 6,000 years as a medicinal. It's one of the few natural products that there's a lot of studies behind. So literally hundreds of studies on the efficacy of elderberry syrup, elderberry juice. It's predominantly used for flu and cold. 15 years, I've been sick once. I tell people it could be my lucky socks. But I used to get sick all the time, and now I don't. And the one time I did get sick was because I sold all of my product and I stopped taking it myself. And I got my first and only round of the flu. There are a lot of other claims. I can't speak to them personally, but you will find claims that it is a natural diuretic, that it helps with diabetes, that it helps lower your blood pressure. As far as I can tell, being an herbalist, you'll find somebody to say that about every single product that's out there. For me, it works for cold and flu. What I have found personally is it doesn't keep me from ever getting sick. I fly quite frequently, and inevitably I get off the airplane with that feeling in my throat and the scratchiness. I will then triple up my elderberry, and I don't have anything last for 24 hours. So it's not just a preventative, it actually does help speed up the healing process. The elderflower syrup, not as many studies. The rational part of my brain says it's got to have the same products, but I can't prove it. So for me, elderflower syrup is purely used in gin and tonics and cheesecake. So I like to call them medicinal cocktails. One of the products that I make is an elderberry lemon syrup, and I use that to make martinis. And you can feel good about drinking a martini at that point. One of the things that really, I think all makers find frustrating is that there are a lot of negative reports about elderberry. And almost all of them stem from one incident back in the 60s where a group of people got violently ill after ingesting elderberries. Now, I'm always a little leery of anecdotal studies. And the fact is that they were actually consuming raw elderberries. No getting around it, elderberry does have cyanide in it. So it's conceivable that if you ate enough raw elderberries and stems, you could have a digestive upset. Nobody's ever actually died from elderberry. And like anything, if you eat the parts that you're not supposed to eat, probably not going to agree with you. One of the things that became very popular in social media during COVID was this idea of the cytokine storm. And it was once again one doctor who had absolutely no experience in nutrition who opined that because elderberry does have an anti-inflammatory effect, that if you had gotten COVID and you were suffering from some of those symptoms, and you were already having inflammatory issues, then taking a product that supported anti-inflammatory was going to create a cytokine storm. And so social media was full of, oh God, elderberry is going to kill you, don't take it. And once that stuff gets out there, you can't stop it. So elderberry is not going to kill you. If you ate a whole elderberry bush from the root up, maybe. You would be so sick before you got to that point that I still don't think it would hurt you. All of that to say, don't eat it raw, and also it tastes bad, so why would you do that to yourself? I have a notoriously short attention span, so my whole business is driven by what I like. That's all you find at my booth, things that I like. So I got bored taking the syrup every day. Just got bored. And so I started making jam. And then I started making elderberry lollipops. I don't make gummies. I send my syrup to another person to make them because making a gummy that is shelf stable is way out of my ability. I use elderberry in everything. So people ask me, how much do I take? A lot. I started off taking elderberry syrup every day. I just took a shot of elderberry every day. My recommended dosage is what the studies have said, which is a tablespoon a day for adults. I'm way too lazy. This is how I take mine. 1 glug is a full dose. I like to eat jam. So all of the jam that I make is half elderberry and half other fruit. It's medicinal jam. If you're gonna eat jam anyway, it's a full dose of elderberry, so why not? I do use the dried berries. There's a lot of controversy about dried elderberries. The reason we heat it up is that it helps get rid of the cyanide. And there's a lot of controversy about whether dehydrating is raising the berry to a high enough temperature to remove that. Yes, it is. 90 degrees is where you need to be. It's safe to consume dried elderberries. If you're worried or you have a compromised system, don't do it. It's just not worth the effort. Myself, I like to mix my dried elderberries when I'm making a pot of rice. So if you're coming to my house, you're getting elderberry rice. Without sweetener, they kind of taste like mushrooms. With sweetener, I call it rice pudding. I use elderberry syrup 1-for-1 in any recipe that I'm using that calls for water. Which kind of leads me to, isn't that gross? No. So the elderberry community is a close-knit community. My elderberry syrup, again, it's the way I like it, not the way most other people want it. So when you go and buy some of the more popular brands in the areas, and we have 50 or 60 elderberry makers just in the Charlotte area. Their syrup is very thick, it's very sweet. There's a lot of honey in it. And typically it has a lot of spices in it because it tastes like dirt. Not that I like dirt, but I like the taste of the elderberry. So I like elderberry jelly. I like elderberry pie. When I make syrup, mine is elderberry juice. This is in no way a pancake thick syrup. It's juice. And what it does for me, aside from the fact that I like this taste and this texture, I can blend it with anything that calls for water. So one of the first things that I made were for my neighbor's kids who would not take a liquid medicine for love nor money, but apparently all children will eat Jell-O jigglers. So I started making Jell-O for them using the elderberry instead of the water, and it was the best thing they'd ever had, and now they're getting their daily dose. All right, so we've been about 30 minutes. That means my syrup is probably done. It is extremely flexible. When I'm cooking at home, I cook mine for 45 minutes. I cook it without a lid. I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty much folklore as to why we do that. But it's not like I can stop doing it because it's how I learned. In theory, you take the lid off when you're cooking it because you don't want those cyanide concentrates. It's a bunch of hooey. It's just not true, but because that's how I learned, when I'm at home, I don't cook with a lid. This is one of my chicken's favorite foods. So I take all of my old elderberries and I dump them out in the yard. Most elderberry makers are gonna take this and they're gonna put it through usually a fruit press to get all of the liquid out. My personal belief is that that makes your product bitter because you are squeezing, I think it tastes bitter. I suggest that's why they put all those spices in it, because their elderberry is bitter. It all tastes like dirt, so what difference does that make? At this point, when I'm at home, I do two things. I sweeten it, and typically when I'm making it at the market, for the market, I sweeten it with honey. I also really love it sweetened with maple syrup, and I have sweetened it with stevia for my diabetic friends who want to still get the benefits. I use a product called malic acid, which is an acid that's derived from apples. And the reason I do this is that my personal products are shelf stable. That means I'm canning them. And elderberries are very, very low in acid. And it's not safe to can them unless you raise that acidity level. So I add a little bit of malic acid. Over the years, I've just gotten used to the way it tastes, and I love it. This is the same stuff that they use to coat gummy worms, the sour worms. So it adds a tartness to it. And when you taste the finished product, you're gonna taste that it's a little tart. So at home, I would put this in, I would put the honey in. But I want you guys to all be able to to taste what it tastes like without anything at all. If you guys have questions, we can have questions. Otherwise, I am happy to invite you up and we'll start the tasting. So we're going to taste this straight stuff. We're going to taste the finished product. And I did bring some gummies because these are the most delicious things in the world. Yeah.
All right, I have a question. You said anti-inflammatory
Yeah.
properties, and are they, is it immune boosting as
Yes.
well? Are
And-
there concerns or guidelines around folks who have autoimmune issues to be taking immune boosters? Would you recommend for it?
It depends on who you talk to. If you talk to somebody that's listening to the one doctor who had no experience, they're going to tell you, don't. You're going to set off a cytokine storm. That's never actually happened. I can't tell you for sure it could never happen. I guess it could. I don't recommend that my herbal clients stay away from it. It's not a medicinal in the sense that a medication would be. It is boosting your own immune system. I can't imagine how much of this product you would have to take in order to set off an adverse effect. Could it happen? Absolutely. If you know that you have an autoimmune problem, would I check with my doctor? Absolutely. I don't take that chance for people. Yeah.
How much do deer love it?
That's hard for me to say. I have a lot of dogs, so the deer don't come anywhere near my garden either. However, they don't typically run the elderberry orchard. I have never seen a deer eating my elderberries. When my sheep get out, they'll eat the crap out of the elderberries, particularly the young ones. The deer so far have totally ignored the elderberries. They'll eat the weeds growing around the elderberries, but don't seem to have any interest in it. Other than birds, there's not anything that wants it other than us. Probably because it tastes like dirt. That's my guess. Yeah.
And so you feed the remains to your chickens?
Yeah.
And they don't have any side effects from the...
Oh my gosh. No, and I make, so when I make a batch at home, I'm definitely a small batch person. I use 24 cups of dried berries when I make a batch. And they're getting that much once a week. And
Okay.
yeah.
And
No.
my second question is, so you take generally a teaspoon a day?
A tablespoon a
A
day.
tablespoon a day?
Yeah.
And then if you feel back 15 years ago when you got sick?
Yep.
How much do you boost that up a little
3
bit?
times a day.
3 times a day.
And what I do recommend to people is if you are not in great health to begin with, and I'm not going to lie, I was not. I started off taking an ounce a day. And that's how I know exactly how much a glug is. It's an ounce. But I'm too lazy to pour it in a shot glass. After a couple of years, I lowered my dosage to a tablespoon a day, which is the typical recommended amount. For kids, it's a teaspoon, for kids under 12. But yeah, I triple up once I feel a little scratchy throat coming on. Yeah,
I saw you, when you make your
yeah.
stuff there, you just, how much water, how do you? what's
Oh,
the
sure,
ratio?
it's 1 to 3, 1 to 4.
1 to 3.
A lot of that, again, is personal preference. Because I like the flavor of elderberry, I tend to, when I'm making it for myself at home, I use 1 cup of dried berries to 3 cups of water. When I'm making it for the market, the average person doesn't like things as strong as I do, so I will do 1 cup of elderberries to 4 cups of water. And what I recommend to people who want to make it for themselves, start off with the 4 cups, taste it and see if it's strong enough. You don't want to just let it keep cooking and cooking, because if you let it sit there for a couple of hours trying to thicken it up, it's just going to get bitter. Yeah.
And is there anywhere in town where you can purchase frozen or dried elderberries?
You can get dried elderberries from almost any elderberry maker.
Not like Whole Foods or...
I've never seen them, and I think it's probably because they're so easily available and the average person doesn't care that they're coming from Croatia. So you can certainly get them online, and they're highly, highly reasonably priced. You are welcome to buy mine at the farmer's market. They're not from Croatia. And you are probably running the risk of seeing the occasional stem in them, because I'm just one person doing it. So, but yeah, I don't see a lot of them. What I see more of locally, and when Fullwood Market was a market, they had a maker who had some dried stuff, but they are typically putting them in kits. So you're getting a lot of the spices and that kind of stuff that's in it, which is fine if you like it that way. I just like the regular berries. But yeah, if you don't mind, I would suggest go online. There are places you can find American elderberries. Again, the place I bought my plants, Norm's Elderberries, also sells, and that's all from their own orchards in Missouri and Arkansas and Virginia. So I love them as a company. Yeah.
So if I'm making it at home,
Uh-huh.
and I do the 1 cup to 4,
Uh-huh.
and then I jar it,
Yep.
would I just put it in the fridge and
Yep.
then it stays good for?
It depends on how careful you are. Remember my glug system. If you are drinking it straight out of the jar, it's going to start growing things in about 3 weeks.
Okay.
If you are mindful and you pour it into a cup, then it's typically going to stay in the refrigerator 6 weeks
Okay.
without a problem. And again, depending on how you've sweetened it. Elderberries want to be wine in the worst way, and they will start to ferment. So even now, if I take this jar home, and this is obviously not sealed, and I put it in the refrigerator, and I don't get to it for 3 weeks, when I open it up, you're going to see it fizz at the top because it's started to ferment. Still perfectly fine. My husband prefers it partially fermented. I don't really like that flavor. I don't care for kombucha, so I prefer mine to not be fermented. But I tell people, until it's growing green and white things on the surface, it's still good to use. All right, you guys come on up. And remember, I'm going to make you try the plain stuff first.
You first, Lynn, you first.
I'm starting to see it right now.
I will say people will take this unsweetened product and put it in smoothies.
And put it in smoothies?
Yeah,
that makes
because
sense.
if you blend out, it's hot, so be careful.
I love elderberry. I think it's
Have you
amazing.
ever had it plain?
Not plain. So we'll see. I think it smells like popsicle.
Yeah.
Please be careful, it is very hot.
Nervous or excited?
I mean, it's not gonna make you vomit, it's just not something you're gonna wanna drink again. I have one customer that really likes it. I mean, I like,
Okay.
I tell people in my garden, you saw some of the stuff I eat out of my garden, you never buy it at the grocery store, but it tastes so good. And it's like, man, so what if something ain't happening like green bean?
there's so much stuff that never makes it to the house.
I can still kind of taste the note of berry behind it, but.
I think the biggest offense is that it's hot.
Yeah, that's pretty terrible.
Real
Nice little fruity thing going on somewhere.
Since y'all are all finishing up, I would say this is the good stuff. If you can gag that down.
I had a gummy on the
Just
way
pour
over.
a little bit in here. Or if you need to get a fresh cup, then do. But help yourself to the real stuff because it's delicious.
It's called a chaser.
You might also use
Somebody's got to be crushed in this and turning it into
water.
I cook mine at home 45 minutes.
Highly advised not.
30 minutes is enough to do it. I have tried, because I do dye wool and I make soap. When you try and use it, it turns brown instead of purple. So it doesn't dye right.
Turn like 180.
After you get, so you can first thing you want to do is actually.
No, every time, this is raising the acidity, so it's safe for me to drink.
So did you put it in here now?
No, this is just straight elderberry. Well, and I'm super cold even though I'm just making it, because I like it very early.
But with this one specifically.
I just want to keep smelling it. Like the smell is so like I keep trying to place it. It's like apples with. You're right. I was when I was sitting there and she opened it and all the scents came into the room. I was like apples with horse poop. Is what it smelled like.
Let's see, how is that possible?
The first step I took, I didn't really care for, but it grew on me real quick.
So is the jar?
I'm actually surprised that you're really good.
It's supposed to have it all. It is kind of twiggy, like the taste. It tastes like the smell of like wood or something.
Yeah, I want to get some sweet.
Sugar's always better.
A little bit of honey.
Yes, this one is made with honey and a little bit of citric acid.
Oh, you do?
Most of my bees I have given to my neighbor, because I just don't have the time to devote to them.
Today I actually got
And it smells more, it doesn't have as much of that earthy smell with the sweetness.
It's delightful. Well, these things, I've proven the right way, they're not overdosed. Because once I start eating gummies, I wasn't 15 or 20 years.
We should, those should start throwing them down.
All the kids and proteins.
Or kids would eat them in
All right. Ooh, gummies are very good. Gummy. That's very good.
Try gummy.
Gummies are very good.
Oh, he was with you, okay. Yeah.
or the time I
You know,
was
and I
there.
can totally see without it being sweetened, how you can use it with rice and you can
Yes,
use it with.
because it's not like a fruit.
Daniel's
It's
garden.
very mushroom.
Yes, and her friend, but before that, she said about
Going out and finding me some elderberries, it's the best time of year for me to be able to find them and transfer them.
She came from up north, you know, from paper.
And you want to just dig up, if you find any of them growing, you'll see them putting out the little canes. You just dig in about halfway between where the plant and the mother plant is, cut that root right in half, and stick it in the dirt.
Dan and I got experience with like that kind of steak last year. Like it went into like major drought, and I have a kind of a creek bed back there. It's not like you can run back there and water. It's, it's like you guys got to survive on your own.
I
None
will
of them
water my
did.
starts for about 3 weeks if it's really, really dry. I try and transplant when it's raining.
Well, if it's in April,
Yeah.
we just hit like that was a bad time. And they weren't like stuck in the side of the creek bank and stuff. There's no way you're going to be able to water.
I have lost them to drought and I have lost them to flooding. One year the rain was so heavy, it literally
My neighbor's got a big bog in their backyard, and I'm going to take it because I know that would be really helpful. Yeah, I could steal their berries if I plant my trees over there.
Concentrate this in the gummy.
2 gummies is a full gummy.
Is it full tablespoon? Okay. So those are the more.
I do.
Yeah, they are wonderful. Appreciate you doing all that. Can I have some more of the hot one?
I'm telling you, it's good, isn't it? I like it. With nothing in it, it's fine.
Going for the pure.
A lot of people are selling elderberry tea, and it's just purple water, because if you are just soaking it in water for 5 minutes, all you're doing is coloring water. You do really need to process them for a good 30 minutes before they really just give it
Was you ever tried?
No, you don't want to boil it. And what I love about the crock pot is it keeps it right at about 200. And you don't want it to boil, you just gotta make it dead.
Okay.
All right, give me that bush.
Have you ever tried dyeing?
When you try and dye with it, because I do dye wool and I also make soap.
Yeah.
It dyes brown.
Oh.
It was super disappointing.
Yeah.
I thought I would get this deep, rich purple, and what I got was brown.
Yeah. That's kind of smart.
It was very disappointing.
Because it's such a beautiful color. Like, it really is.
It is.
All right, we're going to do the raffle real quick. All right, everybody. Everyone got their name in the basket. They got a name on a sticky note raffle ticket. All right, let's see who the winner is going to be. Tell you what, Kate, you're going to go ahead and reach in there and pick one. That's a good one.
Mariah. Now, do not, they are not really happy in pots,
Okay.
but I would not plant it
Okay.
now.
Okay.
It's
'Cause it's not
way
the time.
too hot and
Okay.
it's gonna die.
So by January?
When I'm planting something that big, I wait until February.
Okay.
Just because it's not unheard of for us to get snow. And it's not got an established root.
Okay.
It's likely to not make it through snow. They are fine in the wintertime.
Nice.
He's gonna wanna drop all of his leaves, because
Okay.
that's what they do.
Yeah.
They should be in the process right now of losing all of their leaves and looking pathetic and sad,
Okay.
so don't freak out.
Okay.
But I also wouldn't keep him in the house.
Okay.
If you've got like a porch or a protected corner of the yard,
Okay.
he should be fine
Perfect.
until.
Away from the deer.
I don't
Maybe.
think
And keep it damper than dry, right?
They like it moist.
Kept mine in a pot. What I think I would do is put it in, I have a lot of feed pans. I don't know what real people put their pots in, but I put mine in a feed pan with a little bit of water.
Okay.
And so I will put that much water in, and I let it suck it dry, and then I let it go another week, and then I'll put some more water in.
Okay.
So I like to let them
So
figure
a
out
pan
how
under,
to do it.
something underneath it with water in it.
Yeah, if you don't have a farm, it's like a bowl.
Hey, this is the first time that's farm.
So that spot that Kate was talking about, it's right between where White Duck Taco and the post office is. There's a lot of blackberry in there, so definitely wear thick pants and thick shirts, because you get tore up, you look like you wrestled some cats. But inside of there's a whole bunch of elderberry. And so it should be, if there are any berries left on it by now, they've either fallen or the birds have gotten to it, but there might still be some berries on it. But those, I did get permission from the town that if we did want to cut some canes off of it. But like Kate mentioned, if you're going to cut canes up, that you want them at least as thick as your thumb, and 2-3 foot long, but you want to wait until they're dormant. So you want to wait another couple of months until they do drop all their leaves and they go dormant for the winter time. And then you can just stab them in the mud. If you've got a creek area, they do real well in both shade and sun. Obviously, she's got them in sun because she's trying to get a lot more berry production.
They won't fruit in the shade.
Right. They're not going to do nearly the production that you're going to get, but they really do like it on the moist side. So rain gardens, these things are great for. It makes a good screen, if you don't like your neighbor. It brings in tons of, she mentioned a lot of insects. All the pollinators love it when it's blooming, and then a lot of the birds come, of course, to eat the berries straight. They love it. So Ross Farms is where I got this one, and so they still have a few. but there's more than enough free stuff, just like she mentioned. Anywhere near
Windcrest Organics in Monroe is the other place I know that usually has elderberry bushes. Y'all are welcome to email me long about March and say, hey, can I come out to the farm in April and dig some up? Because I'm just gonna mow them under. I can't, I've got more than I need at this point. And I'm the worst businesswoman in the world. People keep saying, no, you need to dig them up and sell them. You wanna come out and get them, you're welcome to. Yeah.
It does sucker, so if you've got a small yard, just keep that in mind. It's a great spot if you've got an area that's like penned in with concrete, like driveway on one side, walkway on the other, house on the third. So if you've got an area like that, that's a good place for mints because they want to spread. These guys sucker as well.
They really do.
So that's why she's mowing them, you know, she's keeping her paths.
So that's what these are right now, the suckers come up, the runners?
Convenience.
Yeah, the little guy on the side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They got runners, yeah, so they'll just keep.
Well, I mean, it's not like bamboo.
No,
It's not
but
like
they'll,
that.
yeah. but they
I have
will.
some that look like bamboo, and some of it is species specific, so some of them look like stands of bamboo, because that's how they spread. Some of them look more like true bushes, they're just great big 10-foot bushes.
Yeah.
Um,
But they're great. This is, I mean, show of hands, how many people have never tried elderberry? Myself included. All right, most of the room, at least half. So how many people were really surprised how even unsweetened I was expecting, I mean, she sold it as really
I mean, I hate it.
I know, I thought it was actually surprisingly earthy and quite tasty. I enjoyed it.
I could do a tablespoon a day. Yeah, with this, it's not something I would grab a glass full.
Yeah.
I think the sweet wasn't bad,
Yeah.
but I really like something,
Yeah, the gummy
maple
crackers.
syrup.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
I loved it, I loved it. At home for myself, I make it with maple syrup.
All kinds of in
What
my
did you
mouth
say?
today.
You said put
Thank
some
you
gin
very
with
much.
it.
If you don't know, we are on Facebook. Look for Habitat and Wildlife Pictures on Facebook.